Fall camp's continuing for Ohio State, Grant. We've got a big show for everybody today. Arthur Smith and Matt Patricia back-to-back days meeting with the media, along with other offensive and defensive personnel for the Buckeyes. So welcome in to Buckeye Cadence, the heartbeat of Ohio State Athletic. Grant, let's talk about this, man. So we got Arthur Smith first on Wednesday, and then we've got Matt Patricia on Thursday. We're going to go offensive side of the ball first, and then flip over to the defensive side of the ball. Hearing from Arthur Smith, Grant, I'm standing there, and what I'm thinking is, okay, this offense for Ohio State, I already had a lot of belief in, but then hearing his approach to, number one, how the operation of the offense is going to go, which is something we'll get into, and some of the stylistic changes that are going to get made, I also got excited to hear him talk about the depth of the offensive line. Now, health is going to be a mainstay topic for an offensive line on any team, so obviously that has to be something that stays throughout the entire season for that to, again, that unit to reach its ceiling. But talking about the offensive line, Grant, so Arthur Smith yesterday was saying that they have a lot of guys who can play and that the competition is across the board. There's competition at every single position group. Now, we know who we think are the four returning starters for sure, right? But then again, where's Austin Saraville going to play on this offensive line? How is he going to fit into that, right? And something that Arthur Smith said about Saraville was he's a four-position player, so having a guy that's that versatile allows you to have more freedom when trying to get your best five on the line of scrimmage up front in the game. So, Grant, you watched practice last week. We had Thursday, Friday, Saturday practices. We were able to watch and see. So what we saw in those first couple of days of practice, now we're going to pair that with Arthur Smith's comments about this offensive line. How do you see this battle on the offensive line shaking out? Is it going to be Josh Padilla stepping up? Is it going to be Ian Moore stepping up? Does Gabe Van Sickle get another opportunity to go at it and start on this offensive line? What are you seeing? What did you notice in practice? And then we'll compare that to Arthur Smith's comments.
Well, what I noticed personally from last week is that there was a lot of shuffling around, and Ryan Day, admittedly said, that's intentional. We want to do that, especially there's early on, knowing they have this kind of depth. He mentioned, just like you did, there's guys like Josh Padilla that, have been waiting in the wings to get on the line. And with this open spot, he's definitely a prime candidate to be able to do so. So I think, you could certainly see him, especially working on the inside. Again, depending on where they decide to put Saraville, because he's been all over the place on the line. So sounds like he's got a safe spot there, no matter where he ends up playing. Could be a guy that just ends up filling in spots that they need because of the depth that they have. But I think Padilla is probably a guy to look out for right now. Ian Moore, Van Sickle, probably a coin flip between those two guys. I'm sure they're going to try Van Sickle and the tackle position at some point to see how that goes. But again, when you have Saraville and Philip Daniels, you feel pretty good as far as that. So it is, like you said, there's four returning starters. There's guys that we trust to a certain degree. Obviously, there's tape from the last two games last year. But Arthur Smith, he sees the depth. He sees opportunity for some of those guys waiting on the wing right now. So it'll be interesting to see the way that things shuffle out by the time September rolls around.
You want that unit up front to have that continuity. And Grant, I want to go back to something you said about Ian Moore and Gabe Van Sickle. I'm higher on Ian Moore than that. I actually think Ian Moore would be clear ahead of Gabe Van Sickle if there was ever a battle between those two. I think that Ian Moore is a candidate to start on the offensive line this year. Again, they want their best five, and being able to move around Saraville is going to help. But again, health is a big part of this too. Those guys have to be healthy. And something that Arthur Smith said yesterday on Wednesday was we need to make sure that we have a contingency plan in place, because if guys get dinged up, they miss a practice, you have injuries that arise, you want to make sure that you have versions and combinations of that offensive line that can work and that you trust. And part of that you're going to discover in that phase where they're rotating a lot. They're trying a lot of different things here early in fall camp. Again, if you have a guy who can move around, that helps you out a lot. So it's just something to watch. The health of the offensive line is something to watch for sure. But I am higher on Ian Moore than maybe some others. I do think that he has a lot of talent. And maybe last year wasn't the right time for him to step up and play as a starter. But I think this year for Ian Moore, this is the time where he can really take that step forward and contribute in a meaningful way up front for the Buckeyes. And then, of course, you have Luke Montgomery and Carson Hinsman up front as well, the other two guys that we haven't mentioned yet. Those two guys, physically, you can see the body transformations. And I think, Grant, you'll notice this too. You walk into that facility and some of the guys that you saw at the end of last season versus now, and even compare that to the spring a little bit as the in-between check, just timeline-wise. The physical transformation that some of these guys have undergone is noticeable. And that's part of Coach McMurati, why he's one of the best strength and conditioning coaches in the country, and the sports science program that Ohio State has that they use for their student athletes. You can see it. Luke Montgomery has put on some more size, and they look like an offensive line that can go out and maul you. But again, the question with this offensive line is, have we seen it ceiling? That's always the question when you have teams that return a lot of starters and a lot of production, or a unit on a team that returns a lot of depth. Okay, do they have another gear, or have we seen the ceiling? And at the end of last year, you're like, maybe that's going to be maxed out for the Ohio State offensive line. But after hearing what Arthur Smith has had to say, after seeing some of these guys in action, there's a lot of belief and confidence in this room for the offensive line to where they can take that step forward this year. There is more in that tank. There is another gear, and that's going to be something that Ohio State needs to happen to go ahead and make a deep run because of how the season ended last year. You saw the Indiana and the Miami games. Those things cannot be repeated. And immediately off the bat, you're going to have a test in Austin, Texas, against a really talented defensive line for the Longhorns, led by Colin Simmons. You're going to have some answers right away for Ohio State. Now, they'll get better as the year goes on, but if that game looks like Indiana and Miami, there's going to be a lot of concern in that building. I can tell you that right now. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think we're going to walk out of Austin, win or lose for Ohio State, and be like, I don't think that offensive line is better. I think you're going to see the product on the field and go, you know what? That offensive line is better than a year ago. Maybe they just didn't get it done on Saturday against Texas, or the offensive line was the reason that they won. So those are all things that we're watching with the offensive line. And Grant, you mentioned this on the last episode, that Ryan Day wants to have this combination and this line set as soon as they can. But again, results on the field are going to determine that. They're not just going to say, hey, we think this is what's going to be. They want to see some evidence, and that's why they keep switching around in practices. But Grant, Julian Sayin, what did you notice from him the first couple of days of fall camp? We have seen all of the headlines. We have heard from the coaches. We have heard from the players that Julian Sayin has to take a step forward as a leader, as a vocal leader this year. He needs to transform his body a little bit. He needs to put on size and some weight. He's up to 215 pounds now. He needs to create with his legs. He needs to be good in open space and off script. So what you saw of Julian Sayin at Ohio State's practices, what was the thought going through your mind watching 10 this year compared to last year?
Well, the size is obviously noticeable, and by now that's all over X and everywhere else, especially in his legs, which is definitely important considering that he's gonna have to be using his legs more often. But um, I definitely noticed that right away. And then one thing you see with him is, he's always had that quick release, but he can drive the ball downfield much easier now. I know that's something that he's talked about, but you could see it. Not only can he do that, but his mentality, his desire to do so, it's definitely been noticeable. And I know we talked about him and Jeremiah having the little miscommunications, but it's because of that mentality that Sayin is refining that deep ball to a point that it's going to stretch out defenses, and I think that's incredibly important for the run game for running backs and for him being able to work off script, keep pressure off him in the offense. So I think those two things, explicitly stood out right away, it's huge, obviously, for the offense. Very promising for the offense this year. I didn't get to see him run around a lot, just in the practices that I saw, but I did see ball placement, especially that day with McEwen. Ball placement is great. His accuracy is as good as ever. So, you combine that with his quick release, his arm strength, and his processing speed, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, I'm sure. It appears that Sayin has taken a next step as a quarterback. And I know we saw him scamper in the spring game. We know it's there. So I don't doubt that he'll be able to work off script and use his legs some.
Right, and you're mentioning the processing speed. That was something that Arthur Smith called
Yes.
out too. And Grant, you're talking about the accuracy of Julian Sayin, right? So he had the third highest completion percentage in the FBS last season. In the regular season, it was a record. So you take a quarterback that is that accurate, that has the processing speed that Julian Sayin does, where the game looks, he can process so much to him that it feels so much slower compared to somebody else where it feels a lot faster because he knows what he's looking at. He's done the research, he's watched the film, he understands, and he can diagnose things super quickly. And that helps. And Arthur Smith talked about that too. He said, sometimes I got to reel him back in and say, not everyone is like you that can process it that quickly. And that's a good thing to have as a quarterback. But the missing element to his game was creating with his legs, was running the football. And if there is a 3rd and 3, and stuff is covered, the receivers are covered downfield, you're not opting to run the football. And Julian Sayin has to go get it with his legs, or they call a designed run, which I don't think we're going to see a lot of designed runs for Julian Sayin. I do think that his legs will be worked into the game plan, but he has to be able to go ahead and say, hey, if I can get it, I have to be able to get it. And all signs are pointing to that happening, which is great. But again, you just have to see that on the field. So the early returns of these things, yes, we have seen how it ended last year, talked about it ad nauseum. In the spring game, you saw some evidence of that. You've seen it in the practices. You see the physical transformation. You see how he's talking. Ryan Day mentioning he has a different look in his eye. Arthur Smith being very complimentary. Some of the players sharing about the growth that they have seen in him. Carson Hinsman talked about that on Wednesday as well, about Julian. He said what he looked like when he first got to Ohio State compared to now. It's completely different. You can see the confidence inside of him. You can see the growth that he has taken. And Grant, when you have a quarterback that has that complete of a game, assuming that the mobility becomes a mainstay, and then you have these receivers, now you add Arthur Smith to that equation. Right, you had a first-time play caller in Brian Hartline last year, but now you add Arthur Smith to that equation. What effect do you see Arthur Smith having on Julian Sayin, who is now a former NFL head coach and coordinator, just coming in, coaching Julian Sayin, which is outstanding for Sayin, but also for this Ohio State offense? How does Arthur Smith take this Ohio State offense to the next level? How does it look different this year under Arthur Smith than it did a year ago, while still maintaining the integrity of Ryan Day's Ohio State offense?
Well, part of the reason I didn't get to see Sayin use his legs a whole lot is because of the running backs becoming that safety valve and getting involved in the pass game much more often. There's a lot of times where Sayin would normally have to take a sack or force a ball or get out of the pocket and throw it away, or he was able to just dump it off to mainly Isaiah West when I was there. But so I think that's obviously one way that Arthur has made this offense a little different, added another layer for defenses to have to prepare for, along with obviously the expectations and the responsibilities that Sayin is going to have. Arthur Smith hasn't shied away from the day he stepped on campus. He wants to give that responsibility to Sayin. He wants to have more of that NFL mentality on offense. Give the quarterback some choices, give him some options, let him make some decisions on his own. So, Sayin's definitely a guy who can do that. I don't think anyone's doubting that. Especially, we were just talking about the processing speed. It's everyone from Day to Arthur has talked about it. It's there, and he's going to be able to utilize it. So I think Arthur kind of, throwing that on Sayin's shoulders, giving the running backs, a little bit of a different role in the pass game. And then obviously play action is going to be, it's going to be a bread and butter, I'm sure, because of the way that Arthur Smith utilizes the run game in general. He's going to have two big backs between Bo and Isaiah, and he's going to run them. He's going to run them downhill a lot, I'm sure. So I think you have a little bit of a new look, but something that is a little more intricate and something that adds more layers and gives the defense more to prepare for on Saturday. So I think it bodes well for Ohio State.
Something that Arthur Smith talked about too, Grant, was the operation of the Ohio State offense, right? And he was asked a question about last year against Indiana and Miami, was the operation of the offense something that contributed to the miscues, right? And so when you look at the operation of the offense, what is that? What is Arthur Smith talking about when he says the operation? Okay, so the operation of the Ohio State offense, you have to have a play call, and you have to have communication. And you're going to either have the huddle or the verbal play call. Then you've got to get to the line, you got to execute the play, and that is the completion, right? So how can that be streamlined? Ohio State played very slow last year. So if they're getting deep into the play clock and they're calling in a play from the sideline, it's in the helmet comm to Julian, and he's in the huddle. And then they get the play call off. Everybody goes and lines up. They're still deep in the play clock. Now there's another element before this is the quarterback's cadence. And Ohio State uses white 80. That is what Ryan Day wants his quarterbacks to use. It's a white 80, just like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're using that cadence, they also asked him,
"You're not going to give me a jump." So yeah.
Right. Exactly. So that cadence, is it the same? How do you make that different? And so when you're looking at a quarterback's cadence, just like you're saying, okay, if you know my cadence, you're not going to jump off sides. It was a perfect example just then, right? You're not going to jump because you know what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it. And Ohio State has looked the same methodically throughout the season last year. They have a process. They get the check. They go to the huddle. They get to the line. They go through the cadence. They snap the ball. They execute. Teams were able to figure that out. So Arthur Smith was saying, we've got to use that cadence as a weapon. He said cadence is a weapon, which show being called Buckeye Cadence, maybe we rock some merch off of that. Yeah. Cadence is a weapon. Buckeye Cadence is a weapon too.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. A quarterback's cadence is much like a pitcher in baseball, where the pitcher can control the speed of the game. Yes, you can change speeds with a fastball to a changeup, a fastball to a curveball. You can throw different pitches, right? You can change location, you can change speeds. But something else that you can do is you can also change your windup speed. You can go from the windup, and then you get guys on base. You can go from the stretch, and you could slide step. You could pause a little bit if you need to. That's also a weapon that you can use as a pitcher, just like a quarterback can use his cadence as a weapon as well. And I teach my baseball players this all the time when I'm coaching. I'll work with my pitchers, and we'll go through that because you want to find a mental advantage at some point in any sport that you're playing. What are all the advantages that you can find? Uncover every stone. For a quarterback, you have cadence in that arsenal of weapons. And what Arthur Smith is talking about is that's going to be used as a weapon this year. You're going to see some different versions of the entire operation down to the cadence from Ohio State and Julian Sayin, just as much as I'm teaching my baseball players or baseball coaches are teaching their baseball players, saying, hey, when you're on the mound, you can do X, Y, and Z. These are the things that you can do differently. Like I'm saying, I'm working with my pitchers, right? I've got Michael Hinderberger. He is one of my pitchers, and we'll go through what are the mental checks that we could do in an inning to gain an advantage. Yes, your fastball is great. It's in the zone. Yes, your slider's going to look good. It's going to work, right? But what else can we do? And that's what Arthur Smith is talking about here with Julian Sayin and that offense for Ohio State. What else can we do? How else can we give different looks, different checks to the defense so we're not so predictable, right? And so if Ohio State is going to be methodical and it's going to be slow. They've got to do something so they're not predictable in that, even though teams know they're going to be slow. So what I'm gathering from what he said, and I know this is a little bit long because I made it about baseball too, but what I'm gathering from what Arthur Smith is saying with the operation of the offense, with the cadence, is you're going to see some times where Ohio State is going to go up tempo and speed it up. You're going to see times where they're methodical, but they're not going to do the exact same thing, copy and paste every single time. They're not going to walk up to the line of scrimmage and it be the exact same thing every single time. Arthur Smith and Julian Sayin have both said that he's going to get to go the line with 2 plays, and he has the freedom to make those checks there. That's going to be something different than there was a year ago. So, Grant, when you hear all of that, what does that say to you about how Ohio State's offense is going to be impacted this year?
Well, I think about, who is the best of that maybe ever in football, certainly modern day. That would be Aaron Rodgers. And guess who Arthur Smith just worked with last year? Aaron
Right.
Rodgers. So I think it's, that obviously bodes very well for that operation. He's very fresh off working with Aaron. And I know they've been close for a while since Art has been in the NFL. So it's going to be cool to see Julian Sayin utilize an Aaron Rodgers art. And you are right. It's something. It's a timing mechanism that you can use against the defense, and it's just another layer, like we've been talking about. That's something that you would typically see at the pro level that Arthur Smith is bringing to Ohio State. So we're lucky to have a quarterback and a coordinator who are capable of doing that, and it's going to be exciting to see what they can do with it.
Yeah, and you can execute all of that. Again, like you just said, the quarterback coordinator combination and the head coach in there with Ryan Day. And then you have all those veteran skill players on offense too. Your running backs are returning. You have veteran receivers. You have a really veteran offensive line. And you also have veteran tight ends. So all of that combined for Ohio State's going to allow you to be able to do more because of the understanding and the intelligence of that full offensive unit. It's not just a position room. It's the full offensive unit from the quarterback to the coordinator and everybody in between that makes that offense go. That's why that offense is going to look different. And Ohio State's going to be able to do more with what they have. And that's another thing that makes it exciting to see the impacts that Arthur Smith is going to have, because it may not show up as a stat on the post-game box score, but you're going to see its effects throughout the game. You're going to feel it throughout the season, looking at it stylistically, operationally, that it is different knowing that Arthur Smith is there. And again, Grant, that is credit to Ryan Day, who said he wants to model this Ohio State program after the NFL. He has brought in NFL coordinators in Matt Patricia. Now he's bringing in Arthur Smith, also from the NFL. So you have Ryan Day as your head coach. This is his 8th season, who also has an NFL background. Then you have 2 former NFL head coaches as your coordinators, and then they get to coach a really veteran team. There's a lot that can happen with all of those ingredients getting put into a bowl. It's just about, for Ohio State, who's going to be on the field executing in those moments. And Grant, before we go to the defensive side of the ball, we want to remind everybody about an event that we have on August 29th at Dick's House of Sport in Polaris, Ohio, Tailgate Takeover. We want to make sure that you guys are invited. So if you are listening on podcast, this is going to be in the description. If you are watching on YouTube, go ahead and screenshot this QR code, get another device and take a picture of it. That's where you can register for the event. Bring your entire family, because football season is almost here, Grant. We can feel it. It's in the air. We're this much closer now, just a couple of weeks away. We're going to kick that off at Dick's House of Sport at Tailgate Takeover. We have TSB Live coming back. We've got special guests, former players. There's going to be giveaways, tailgate items, merch on sale. You have got to get geared up for football season. And what better place to do that than Dick's House of Sport? They have got everything you can imagine for every sports team that you want to root for here in Ohio. If you're going to root for the Buckeyes, the Browns, the Bengals. And listen, if you want to get some other sports, they've got you covered too, because this is Dick's House of Sport. They have everything that you're going to need for football season, from the tailgate all the way to the seat, rooting for your favorite team. So we cannot wait to see you guys there and meet all of you. Again, TSB Live going to return to Dick's House of Sport on Saturday, August 29th from 12 to 3 p.m. You are not going to want to miss. this event. It's for the entire community and your family, and we're so excited to partner with them and see you guys there and preview the Ohio State football season. That show's going to be great. All right, Grant. Matt Patricia, we're going defense now. The second of Ohio State's NFL coordinators, he met with the media on Thursday. Grant, when you see what Matt Patricia had a year ago, all of that talent on defense, some of those guys are in the NFL. Some of those guys are back. The highest production has gone off to the NFL. Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, Caleb Downs, Caden McDonald. They're now playing on Sundays. But Grant, Ohio State has a lot of talent that they've accumulated from the transfer portal, also that they've developed in-house. Hashtag developed here. Matt Patricia, year 2. He's back. There's continuity there. And he talked about this today with Jalen McClain. This defense is not going to be the defense it was last year. But that doesn't mean this defense isn't good. Matt Patricia said it's not about better or worse. It's about different. This defense is different. So, Grant, how is this defense different for Ohio State this year? This is Matt Patricia's second defense. He kind of got a hand now. He inherited last year's defense, and then he enhanced it. This year, he had a say in constructing the personnel on this defense. So how do you see this defense shaking out for Matt Patricia? Do you think he has more pieces to work with? What do you see differently this year compared to last year?
Well, he definitely has more pieces to work with, and I think that was intentional, especially with pieces they got in the portal. Matt Patricia comes from the do your role school of Bill Belichick. So I think what you're starting to see is more guys who could specialize in certain things, certain aspects of defense, excel in certain ways that he can take advantage of. So lots of talent, lots of depth on this team, on this defense rather. I think it's something that's better than last year. Obviously, lots of NFL draft picks, but they played a ton of snaps and they stayed on the field. So you're going to have guys that are fresh. You're going to have younger guys getting more experience in their selected roles. But I think that's great. I think the way that he's going to operate this defense is, again, like more of the Patriots teams that we grew up with these guys that become household names because they can execute a role better than anybody else. So I think Patricia, he's getting the mad scientists, kind of mentality back. He's got his hands on his guys, like you said. He got to pick a lot of them and develop a lot of them. So to be able to see what he's going to be able to do with them and how he's going to utilize them is going to be very fun to watch.
I think so too, Grant. And when I'm looking at this defense for Ohio State, I'm realizing that, and Matt Patricia said this today, he was like, you know what? Do we have more snaps available this year than we did before? He's like, are we older than we were last year? And a lot of us believe that we are. We have not gone to Stats and Info to confirm that. But because Ohio State went to the transfer portal to bring in the more experienced guys, that's where you start to see exactly what you said. This is a really experienced defense, but they just haven't played together. Can they execute their role? Can you do your job and piecemeal this defense to come together? Because you replace Caleb Downs in the aggregate. You replace Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese in the aggregate because those are not carbon copy players. They don't make them in a factory somewhere. They're once in a while kind of players. And Ohio State has a lot of talent there, but they don't have the second 2.0 version of those players yet. They have to develop into them. So can Matt Patricia develop these guys into versions that can play at the same or near the same level as a year ago? And Grant, Jay Timmons, his name continues to come up. And you talked about this in your article, that quarterback or cornerback battle, rather. The DBs for Ohio State, there's a ton of options. There's a lot of depth. So when you see the DBs, how do you see the DB room shaking out? Because you've got safeties now. Earl Little was playing a lot closer to the line of scrimmage and in the nickel in the spring. Now all of a sudden he's on the back end with Jalen McClain, and it looks like him and Jalen McClain are going to hold it down on the backside. So again, different combinations. Ohio State's moving guys around. But from what you saw at practice to what we're hearing, what do you see this defense shaking up to be on the backside of it with all the defensive backs? Who's going to play the nickel? Who's going to play on the outside? Who's going to play on the back end?
Well, I think until proven otherwise, Jermaine Matthews will still have a heavy role in the slot, especially with him coming back and having the experience that he has. I think that'll be his to lose. Obviously, Terry Moore has the capability of moving in and out and filling in for guys. I'm sure he will play a large role, no matter what it is. Maybe it's more of a utility guy, if you will, on defense. But as far as the outside on the boundary, Timmons, Jay Timmons and Dominic Kelly, um, I mean, they've both been going at it. It's, guarding anyone you could think of on any route, at any snap. Both of those guys have been excelling in a lot of ways. Obviously, especially impressive that Timmons is able to do so young. It made an impression on guys like Jeremiah Smith immediately in spring, and he's still able to sustain that. I think it's very impressive at the corner position to be able to do that. And for his size, he shuts down guys. And as far as Dom Kelly, very agile, very athletic, has a little bit of experience from Georgia, so he has maybe a little more seasoned. Maybe the coaches consider that in deciding who takes over that role. But I think those are the two guys that you have to keep your eyes on, because either one could slide into that CB2 role, and they're both very capable of doing so. So lots of uber athletic guys to complement Devin Sanchez on the other side.
Right, and Grant, you talk about Devin Sanchez's Ohio State's maybe lockdown corner for this year. Then you have a guy like Jermaine Matthews who's played on the team for a couple of years now. Do you see Jermaine having a role that's more on the inside in the nickel, playing the slot, or do you see him more as an outside guy this year because of the personnel that Ohio State has?
I definitely see him more on the inside, just because, like I said, the pure athleticism, the change of direction, that Timmons and Kelly have. It's something that is something that you can't teach, especially when you're having a corner out on an island or way out on the boundary where help is further away, and you can't necessarily just play to one side or force them to the line. These are two guys that can really excel in that area, and I think that's why Ohio State went out and got Dom Kelly, and they've given Jay Timmons a chance, and he's excelled in that. So again, there's a lot more depth to have there, because there's Cam Calhoun, who's a fifth guy that we haven't talked about, who they brought in, who could potentially earn some playing time. So I think, especially because of his experience in the slot, if he's able to excel even more this year and really lock down that, that's something that he's become a specialty position for him, and something that is a bit of a embarrassment of riches for Ohio State to bring back. So I think he'll stay in that slot role for a little while.
And someone else I want to talk about too, Grant, is Jalen McClain, the safety. Now, last year and the year before, Caleb Downs was that captain of the defense on the backside. Like, you had another coach on the field with him and Sonny Styles. And then Jalen McClain has been a part of this program now for a couple of seasons, and he's now one of the veterans that's on the field. And Matt Patricia talked about it, where he said he's able to look at schematics with Jalen McClain. He's able to use him similarly to Caleb Downs from the sideline. The skill sets are a little bit different, but Jalen McClain is that guy who's been stepping up on the backside of that defense as a leader, as someone who knows the same vocabulary, the same terminology. It's the same for him versus the guys coming in. So he's able to help teach the other guys on the backside of that defense, and he's increased in his role this season. There's high expectations for Jalen McClain at Ohio State this year, and playing alongside Earl Little likely on the back end of that defense to help lock it down is going to be good for Ohio State. And I think that those two in tandem are going to be successful. And the Ohio State defense this year, Grant, I think they're going to force more turnovers in the passing game than I think we saw a year ago. I think these corners are going to be handsy in the sense of they're going to get their hand on the ball. It's not so much like the Davison Igbinosa where you're going to be worried there's pass interference anytime the ball's targeted to his receiver. But I think they're going to be great cover corners. The safeties are going to ball hawk. And so I'm excited to see that from this group of players because there's an edge and a swagger to this defense on the back end. But also, Grant, yes, the back end serves as the shell to the defense, but we got to talk about this front seven. Now, linebackers, no Sonny Styles, no Arvell Reese. So Christian Alliegro and Peyton Pierce appear to be the two starting linebackers for Ohio State. And then you have TJ Alford and Riley Pettijohn trailing right behind. And so when you see those two guys, Alliegro and Pierce, Alliegro comes in from Wisconsin, and he was one of those candidates. He was one of those guys that you are watching the film against Alabama and Ohio State against Wisconsin last year. Yes, he could play on the field, so they decide that they want to bring him in. He can be a guy who rushes the quarterback. And this is really where I want to go with this, Grant, with this front seven. How does this front seven generate pressure on the opposing quarterbacks? How do they stop the run? Because you don't have Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese. Just go ahead and send Arvell Reese off the edge. And then you have Caden McDonald, who's a refrigerator up the middle, and you're not worried about anybody getting past the line of scrimmage when you can send that kind of pressure. But this year, you have to work with Peyton Pierce and Christian Alliegro, who are talented guys. Then you bring in a guy like Quay Russaw, who we also talked to, and he said that he sees himself as more of a hybrid guy where he is a stand-up edge is what he called it today. He said the apex. That's been rumored to be the buck position. Whatever you're going to call that, it's something that he's going to be a stand-up as an edge, similarly to Arvell Reese from a year ago. So now, if Quay Russaw can come off the bench in pass rushing situations, then you have Kenyatta Jackson off of the outside as well. That could work for Ohio State. Is that their path to getting pressure? You have James Smith and Edric Houston potentially in the middle, just plugging up those run holes. So when you look at this front seven, Grant, are you concerned that Ohio State's not going to be able to get pressure on the quarterback? Because when I look at this team as a whole, the offensive line is the biggest question on offense. How do they generate pressure is my biggest question on defense. So when you hear that about the defense, is that an area of concern to you? Are you more confident than I am in this Ohio State defense? What did you see watching practice from that group up front? Because Edric Houston had some really good days, and we know what Kenyatta looks like. But now all these different pieces that we've talked about on that defensive line, who do you see to step up there?
Well, I think Russaw has really no choice but to step up. Obviously there's a lot of different ways that they plan on bringing pressure, whether it is Alliegro, who has impressive size. He's able to rush the quarterback, like you said, if he has to. Obviously, James Smith and Edric Houston are two very explosive D tackles. They aren't guys who are just going to sit there and be the proverbial fridge in the middle of the defensive line. They're able to stunt and rush the quarterback and collapse the pocket, which is something that I saw plenty last week. And then obviously, like we were just saying, Quay Russaw has to be able to be enough of a threat from that kind of hybrid position, that stand-up back position, that he can generate pressure on the edge and force quarterbacks into making bad decisions, because it's going to take a little more than our D tackles having to take over that role, because they're going to have to be stopping the run, grabbing linemen, staying in gap lanes and everything else. So a little bit of a concern just because we haven't seen it in game. But the potential is there. They have the guys to be able to do it, and from all different angles and positions. So they should be able to do it. Until we see it, it may be a little bit of a question.
Grant, do you have a breakout player on that defense? Maybe it's on the defensive line, maybe it's a linebacker. Do you think like Riley Pettijohn is going to step up and all of a sudden be a third linebacker that Ohio State is going to play this season? Because in talking to Matt Patricia, he was asked a question about, are you going to play with more 3 linebackers or more 5 DBs? And he talked a lot about saying, well, we're going to look at what the offensive personnel is and see what best fits for our defense because of how versatile that it is. Because Ohio State will have the option to do either if they want to. They'll know what their base is and what their strength is, but then they'll have the opportunity to either bring on a 3rd linebacker or have a 5th DB on the field. So when you see something like that, does that maybe alert you to say, hey, is there a guy we should be watching as a breakout candidate on this defense?
Well, I think that it's either one of the Alabama transfers, both James Smith and Quay Russaw. Um, they were brought in to do very important jobs on our defensive line. And if they're able to do so, obviously they've talked about James Smith and his explosiveness and his abilities. If he's able to utilize that snap to snap, he could become a game wrecker. He could become a guy on our defensive line on the interior that creates havoc. And then obviously Quay Russaw, I think he has the most potential being in that position because of the hybrid nature of it, the ability of him to be able to rush the passer or stay in his lane or drop back into coverage. He's got that potential to become, I don't want to compare him to Arvell Reese, but if, him being in that role, he's going to have a lot of opportunities to make a lot of plays. So I think Quay Russaw, he's primed to be able that breakout guy.
Grant, the last thing that I want to say, so we'll close the show with this, right? Ohio State has 2 NFL head coach coordinators. And when we asked Matt Patricia, what's it like working with Arthur Smith? He said, well, number one, we're both blessed and lucky to be here at Ohio State with Coach Day, who's brought us both from the NFL. He mentioned that he is excited for Arthur Smith to experience the joy that he experienced last year, making the transition from the NFL back to college to coach these younger kids and develop these young men. And that's something that's really valuable to Matt Patricia. You see him light up anytime he talks about his players, anytime he talks about being here at Ohio State and Coach Day and Columbus and his family and seeing how relational of a guy that he is. He was actually telling us before the camera started rolling what he was doing over the summer. And he said that he was on vacation, we won't tell you where, and he was catching sharks. He was fishing for sharks. He said he caught a couple 7-8 footers. And so he was having a great time just chopping it up with us. But again, that's just how relational that he is. But at the same time, these are 2 NFL coordinators, Grant. So iron sharpens iron here for them. And he said, having Arthur here, he's like, there's times I'll use his eyes to help me diagnose the defense and say, hey, what do you see here to help us disguise and create different packages and different looks for the opposing offense? And that's going to work in the opposite direction just as well. Arthur Smith can ask Matt Patricia, what do you see right here to help, again, the Ohio State offense? And again, you can disguise defense better than offense sometimes. But those 2 working in tandem together, I just think is going to be so beneficial for Ohio State, seeing that experience. And I don't know if the Arthur Smith hire is getting as much credit as it deserves nationally from teams when they look at what Ohio State can be this year. I do think there's going to be a noticeable difference having Smith on that offensive staff. What do you think?
No, it is. Like we've talked about, like this guy worked with Aaron Rodgers last year. Not just, being a head coach in the NFL and having that experience in the NFL, but working with some of the greatest players that ever played a game very recently. So, he's bringing in a new look. He's bringing in some new layers, some new options for the offense, something that should catch teams off guard. And I think it is very exciting for him to be able to parlay off of Matt Patricia, who was at one point the best defensive coordinator in the NFL, bar none. So the experience, the knowledge, what they're able to teach guys, I think it's invaluable. And I think it is a great hire.
There's no doubt. And I'm excited to see the on-field product from Ohio State as they've now implemented this offense for Ohio State. And again, seeing what Matt Patricia does with this defense. There's a lot to cover, and we're going to have you every step of the way. So, guys, we appreciate you listening to today's show. Again, like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching right now. Make sure that you're subscribed because we appreciate that. It's absolutely free. It's just going to notify you when we put up a new video. And then we'll have some exclusive YouTube content as well. So make sure that you're subscribing to the YouTube channel. And again, that's at the Silver Bulletin. And then for the podcast feeds, make sure you're subscribing to Buckeye Cadence. Guys, if you want to check out all of our written work, that's on our website, tsilverbulletin.com. Social media is at tsilverbulletin on all platforms. Grant, go ahead before we close and get out of here. Tell them where they can find you on social media.
G Kincaid 8 on X, and then Kincaid 8 anywhere else.
And guys, if you want to check out my coverage, again, just as an extension, it's at Blake Biscardi on all platforms. But again, make sure you like and subscribe to the show. We appreciate you guys listening, and we will see you next time as we have Ryan Day's press conference on Saturday following a scrimmage for Ohio State. So we'll see you on Saturday. Until then, God bless.